The trade routes, just taking an example of the famous Silk Road, brought people from Middle East to Asia, Europe, everywhere. And yes, it took longer than the speed of internet today, but it made the work. And we played a huge role in this as a maritime industry. So how can it be that we, as a trigger of globalization, historically for thousands of years, today are feeling ourselves closed, conservative, and running after technology and not leading the technological revolution? It should change.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 203. I have met a change agent. Her name is Marianna Levtov, and she's highly interested in interoperability within the supply chain, innovations in IoT, and digitised solutions in transport and logistics. I wanted you to be able to listen to Marianna and her thoughts about digitization within the maritime industry and what she sees on the horizon. I hope you will enjoy our conversation. Hello and welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Marianna Levtov. I am from Switzerland and I am head of regulatory affairs at Nexxiot, company that is a trade tech specialist and digitizing the whole supply chain.
And what is your background?
My background is international relations, and originally I didn't plan to be in supply chain. I was a short-term diplomat serving in Germany, and due to the family reasons, my husband and I, we moved to Switzerland, and I needed to reinvent myself from the beginning because my diplomatic mission was over, and there was no mission to Switzerland at that moment that I could switch and start working again. So I was searching for a place that would be fitting my skills and also leave me space for freedom and creativity. And this was the hope retrospective, let's say like this. I, at some point in the beginning especially, just wanted to find another job.
But how come you started with international relations then? Was that something you knew from you was a child, or?
I loved languages, cultures, history, and one of the ideas to expand the knowledge was to go into political science. And political science was too narrow, and I decided that international relations would be something that would fit me the best because it would enable me learning about different cultures, learning by doing, let's say like this. And this was really the right choice, I think.
So now you're in the shipping industry, or do you consider yourself being part of the shipping industry?
Indeed. I do understand that I could have a different alternative. Once I was visiting Washington, D.C. in a mission, and I took an Uber, and we were talking to the driver, and the driver said that he is also an international relations specialist, and I think even PhD. And shortly before he was working in a think tank, but life changes, and he can't find anything better but to be an Uber driver or maybe become barista in Starbucks. So I understood that actually a matter of luck if you can find yourself in the right place and be very happy with what you studied.
So what was it like to enter into the maritime, the shipping industry?
It was a long forgotten dream. My grandfather and my father, they are both from maritime. My grandfather was a marine and the father was exactly in the trade shipping industry and made a lot of international travels when I was a very small child. I basically loved the sea, dreamed about the sea, but couldn't find myself a good application. I'm coming from a country where women are also serving in the army. And one of the options was to go to the maritime service, basically for 2 years. But since this service is a unique and elite service, it's not always available. Not every recruitment year it was open. I tried from the beginning. I tried later to apply again. they had enough staff, so I didn't get there. And I forgot about it, basically, that this could be an option. And then when it revealed itself again within the company's opportunity, I was very happy to keep it to myself, and actually in the beginning even not to share with anyone, because originally Nexxiot was focusing on the rail industry and rail supply chain, not going into intermodal containers and maritime.
But now you are. So what do you do now? What is head of regulatory affairs? What does someone do who's got that title?
This is a very interesting field when you are in IoT or digitalisation supply chain business, because to digitize, for example, a container, you need to consider hardware that will collect the data, you need to consider software that will aggregate the data and process the data, till creation of different type of applications, physical platforms, websites, whatever is useful today for the business, and also applicability of the solutions within the maritime industry. So we can sit and, in theory, discuss or imagine any type of solution that can help the industry, but without the knowledge from inside about the ecosystem and the needs, it's impossible. And especially within the intermodal transportation, that has the biggest part of it, the maritime part, the interoperability between the stakeholders is one of the key points. We are dealing with international trade, and there is not always harmonization between different countries, regulations, regarding all these elements I was talking about, starting from physical hardware that might have batteries, electronics on board, and finishing with cybersecurity, that is also part of this whole solution providing gig. And as a head of regulatory, I am representing the company in multiple forums, associations, communities, standardization bodies, certification bodies, and proactively discuss potentially new technology to become a new standard, or updating the old standard to the new reality, and to engage in as many stakeholders as possible. It's a very interesting diplomatic game, because the interest is to involve as many potential clients as possible into this discussion, but also as many potential competitors as possible, because it's way more interesting to compete on higher level of quality than just to compete on price. And I find it very sophisticated and interesting position that is comparable to the chess game.
So where are the hurdles? Are we sort of a mature industry now when it comes to IoT, or are we still in the beginning?
It's a very good question. Industry is big, and people who are involved in this industry, and they represent a variety of opinions and experiences. There is a mainstream opinion that is changing after the COVID pandemic situation, or started to change during COVID time, that industry is ready now, but still needs to define the goals and use cases. Previously, it was way harder because the business worked as usual, and it worked. The revenues have been stable, and there was no immediate need for change. And I think that the current geopolitical situation and the pandemic consequences, they changed this mainstream opinion. There are people that are willing to see a progress but not willing to contribute. This is another hurdle. And I think the biggest hurdle is that the maritime industry has huge organizations involved. And participants of these organizations and members, they are not always talking to each other. And in this sense, we can innovate or discuss a standard with representative A, but it doesn't mean that representative B, who is doing a commercial decision at the end of the day, is aware about this process. And this is the matter of communication rather than a challenge of the industry itself. It's probably a psychological factor.
Well, it might also be that we are still working in silos. We haven't really
Indeed.
adopted a new way of working, and that must come from the top, I think.
Indeed.
So are we going to wait for them, or are the front runners moving ahead from the other ones? Or
I think that by nature of economy, the industry won't wait. You will always have some front runners that will try and experiment, and the others will need to make their decision post factum. Will they join the race? Will they do something different and run again ahead, but their own marathon? Both options are possible, of course. From this point of view, I think forums, conferences, trade shows that enable speaking slots are one of the best solutions ever, because they enable different voices to be heard, and people who are visiting these events as participants, they are finally getting to know things that are happening, things that are changing, the new discourses that are discussed, and so on.
So if we compare the maritime industry to rail and air and car, are we equally good at adopting digitalization, or are we sort of still runner-up? I don't know how to express that.
I can only express my biased opinion from what I'm observing during the last 5 years in rail and maritime. And I can tell you that I think in maritime we're a little bit behind. First of all, based on the technology availability in reasonable prices, what we are used to have when we are moving on land, even you and I in our cars or trains, we used to have good infrastructure or reasonable infrastructure for connectivity to the internet, to the cloud. We are not thinking about it. You and I are sitting in different locations right now, and we can see each other, we can talk, and it's totally happening in microseconds. It's not even a question. From another point of view, maritime industry has technology to provide the connectivity during the transportation on board of a vessel. Nevertheless, commercially, such an investment is not justified. For military purposes, for example, connectivity is necessary in sea for communication with a port, indeed, for communication of steel boxes with any kind of a tower, just to let you know that I'm still there and nothing has happened to me. It's probably not the most reasonable or first application that can justify the high price. And this is the biggest difference. Today, after experiencing supply chain hurdles due to pandemic crisis in different locations, we are more keen to know where are our goods, where is our parcel or our box, and we do want to know the condition. In the beginning, the main pushers have been those who were transporting perishable goods. They found the justification. Pandemic period found the justification for the pharmaceutical goods or emphasized it. And now we also want to know about the rest, because we are tired from unknown situation. We are tired to wait indefinite lead times for components and goods.
Some people say that there is a lack of standards for the maritime industry. Is that what is needed, and is someone doing that, setting up some standards?
Standards is a field where you can always find gaps and you can always work on it, because it's a consensus between multiple parties that must satisfy at least the majority. And the risk is that if we standardize something without looking at all stakeholders, including competitors in the market, we create something that is not applicable and will be rejected naturally by the industry. Therefore, I wouldn't say that's a matter of standards, but standards always have to do with this. Standards can support the population of technology, or faster distribution of technology. What we are lacking is active voices that need to come together and speak and see what is there. We are lacking sometimes a wish to try something new and to bring the new technology to the level that it we need to be able to integrate one technology to another technology. The technologies should speak to each other. It sounds very trivial and not clear, but if I'm, for example, having some sensors within the box that tells me about the cargo condition, and I have some device that sits on the container in the permanent way, I want these two to communicate with each other and align. And I want to know the status of the box, and I want to know the status of the pallet of goods that is inside the box and their condition. If I am a technology provider of either of these two solutions, and I decided that my technology is proprietary, the communication will never happen. Whatever the reason is why I decided so, because I want to be unique, because I want to have a higher price, and so on, so on, so on. The same as with connectivity, we need to be open to try something that can be reasonable price-wise, that can be spread all over the industry, but can be also efficient in satisfying the use cases that we're discussing. And for this, the institutions, standardization bodies are working very hard. You can have famous ones that I'm a big fan of, like ISO. You can be also relatively new but efficient Digital Container Shipping Association, or anyone else, doesn't matter. In the moment that an organization is calling for a dialogue or a big discussion between many, many parties, there is a chance that we will come to this technology as a standard faster.
So what are the biggest changes that you have seen so far? Where is the development happening?
We started to talk, first of all. Technology providers, digital technology providers are not anymore strangers to classical associations within our industry. Starting from traditional associations like Container Owners Association or International Standardization Organization or even IMO or even World Shipping Council, our voice is heard. There are opportunities to join these discussions through the national delegations. There are opportunities to join it by an invitation, and I hope that we will be also invited to other organizations very soon, like DCSA, as I mentioned before, or anything else. An amazing opportunity to collaborate is also UNCFACT. It has also transportation and logistics domain, and things are discussed there. It's just about the wish of investing time and raising the voice and moving the processes within any of these bodies. The result will be there.
So how do you see the future for the maritime industry? Are we going to be all digitized and all, at the front run of technical development again? And I don't know. What do you see?
I think we have done a huge progress in the last 3 to 5 years at least. We have discussed the technologies that exist. We are deeply involved in safety discussions for this technology, because the matter number one, the goal number one, that no technology that proposed to the market will not endanger neither people nor goods. And for this, the quality and the respect to the quality is very important. The second thing is digitalization should enable people to be more creative and not to scare them that it will take their jobs. It should increase the efficiency, transparency, and support people to have more time for interesting work and to feel the work-life balance. And we are coming to this because we are supporting right now with active participation in discussions on electronic bills, standardization, and e-paper work. We support people to think about that manual work is not more needed. It can be done in the microseconds of transition of data. We're still not there. We need to enable it, but we're coming close to this. And there's nothing scary about it, because we speak about automation and digital. Everyone has computers, but you have still multiple parties that are working with Excel files that are filled in manually by hand. I mean, there are people that love it. I know there are people that love Excel tables, but it's not necessarily the majority. And maybe you can save this time by doing things in a more efficient way through digital application.
But that also leads us to my soapbox. How do we recruit more people into this industry? How are we presenting ourselves to people outside and young people? And we spoke about that a little bit when we met in Amsterdam. So what are your ideas?
I'm very excitedly looking into the future because along with the technology for digitalization of the processes, you have also new technologies that make a CO2 reduction contribution, like different types of collapsible containers and so on. This is coming. And this can't be a process that comes within the industry itself. It needs a fresh air. It needs specialists that saw something similar in science, in external world, and imagine that this is applicable also within the maritime industry. You need this fresh air, fresh knowledge that can come from any field of our activity from outside. So we are speaking not about involving only social scientists like myself. We can speak about data scientists. We can speak about engineers that previously have been working on totally different projects, people who are specialists in statistics. One of the biggest examples for this is, of course, the data scientist, IT specialist, and so on. From one point of view, when we look at this, not too close. IT is a field that you can study. It can be called in a different ways, and you search for very particular specialists. But when you speak about artificial intelligence and machine learning, this is not enough only to understand how to make a code. You need to be very close understanding statistics, for example, and different very interesting algorithms, how to predict a result or an average and make this algorithm being more looking into the future. And this is something that needs a lot of knowledge way beyond the regular scope that we can imagine. And if we go today to a university and look at the bachelor's or master's or any type of students or representatives of education, we will see that we can take almost each and every one, and he will find something very interesting in our industry.
But how will they know how interesting we are? How do we become more visible to people who doesn't really know about us?
We need to create a narrative. It's about an interesting discourse. We are forgetting sometimes that maritime industry has an overwhelming history and past, and has same overwhelming future if we make it attractive. Once it was the only source of commerce, basically, international commerce that brought the first globalisation. The amazing goods from China reached Europe, amazing goods from Americas when discovered in India reached Europe again, another way around. Unfortunately, from Europe also many illnesses reached like this. The New World, it's maybe not the most positive outcome, including slavery and the rest. Nevertheless, maritime routes have been one of the most interesting, expanding mindset industries, right? And this shouldn't be forgotten. It's not boring. It's not about container. It's not about Tetris, how we locate containers on the vessels and goods inside this, and way more. We need to speak about it. We need to write books about it. We need to talk about it at conferences with people. And the conferences should be for interdisciplinary purposes, I think. This is one of the points when we educate ourselves within our own industry. It doesn't bring a lot of benefits. Maybe we need to be also part of some university programs. We need to be invited, despite being industry specialists and not professors by education.
But also will mean that there will be more women in this industry because, there is no gender for knowledge.
There is no gender for knowledge. And since we need creative solution in order to make progress in our industry still affordable financially, we need different mindset. In this sense, and here I'm biased because I'm a woman, I think that women can bring a lot of new insights, new way of thinking, new way of approach to clients, new way of approach to products, and strategy that previously maybe have been neglected or not developed.
Did you have a role model growing up?
Yes, and it was my grandfather, a female role model, if you're asking me about. As one, I didn't have, but many women inspired me a lot. When I was in international relations later on, I was impressed by women in politics and their ability to negotiate, hold the face and behave, be polite. And I think this was very impressive for me.
I understand that you are now a role model. Do you consider yourself to be that?
It's a hard question. Sometimes I'm sad that I am. It's a big responsibility. And I think if I will see myself as a role model, I will stop being one, because it's a question of ego.
That's very wise. Can't be a role model unless you can listen. That's true. So how do you see the future in general for us as an industry? Are we going down the same rabbit hole that everyone else is doing right now? But I mean, if you think a little bit ahead.
It's a very good question, because calling for more cooperation, calling for more participation and publicity, it's a nice shout out, but who needs to enable it, right? We need to do it ourselves. And I think that it should be some kind of a spillover process from within companies and organizations into the industry itself. And here, I think it's equally right to say, regarding new technology and regarding new approaches in management or positioning of women in the industry, or positioning people who have having different background in the industry and giving them chances to grow. I think that one of the ways to do it is to have different types of mentor-mentee program. From technology point of view, I can give you an example. I was challenged by my CEO a few years ago when I was moved to a hardware division from totally soft skills, from biz dev into hardware. And the first challenge was to understand how to perform in a department where physically you can't really contribute because you are not an engineer. You can't build a device. You can't probably even understand differences in the beginning between fuses and boards and so on. And even if you start learning right now, the time that is given to you to adapt yourself to a new role is relatively short, shorter than 5-10 years of education that's needed for this, or 3. So you need to find a way of creative contribution from what you are doing. You need to bring something into the team and be willing to learn what the team is doing in order to understand for which facts or information to hunt outside. And I had a mentor. The head of the department became my mentor. And he explained to me, like to a small child, very patiently, what is what, how it works. And he listened to my ideas, and he didn't deny my ideas, even knowing from the beginning that from engineering point of view, they might not work. And this has speeded up the process of education and helped me a lot to raise my voice later on in different standardization institutions on the same level as engineers, because the facts that I knew, I could work with them and elaborate things I didn't know. I could come back, let's call it home, to my department, ask questions, and I knew that I would be explained. From this interaction, I could become more valuable for the team. And I think it's one of the most successful integrations from zero into something that I feel very comfortable today. And this mentorship without judgment, this unconditional support, this is something that enabled my entrance into a field that was by default closed for me. And I think this should happen also on different levels as well. And the same when the new technology enters the industry and there is a company that by default is not fitting the industry because it serves something different. For example, it serves banking or serves insurances or pharmaceutical. To listen to what they are saying actively, as you say, to enable them to teach us and to mentor them how they could fit in, will create the synergy that will create the innovation. and progress within the industry. To this open listening mentor-mentee program from inside into the outside. Because, Lena, I need to tell you honestly, this is one of the most interesting things. Globalization that we are talking about is not a new thing, right? It not only happened due to internet. We have been very global 1.5 century before. People traveled in 19th century way more than the middle of 20th century, for example. The trade routes, just taking an example of the famous Silk Road, brought people from Middle East to Asia, Europe, everywhere. And yes, it took longer than the speed of internet today, but it made the work. And we played a huge role in this as a maritime industry. So how can it be that we, as a trigger of globalization, historically for thousands of years, today are feeling ourselves closed, conservative, and running after technology and not leading the technological revolution? It should change.
I totally agree with you. Well said.
Thank you.
I think this is what my podcast is here for. Because you need new ideas and new thoughts in your head. And you get that when you listen to different people. And that is why I started this a couple of years ago. Thank you very much, Marianna, for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you in the future again, because I think we had a nice exchange of ideas.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for giving an opportunity to speak up.
Thank you, Marianna. We are getting closer to the end of the year, but I'm preparing for one more episode, 2022. The last Shipping Podcast Friday is on December the 30th. I think that we have had excellent guests this year. As well, I might add. All guests on the Shipping Podcast are outstanding and also a bit brave since they sign up for a conversation with me. I would be happy to receive some comments from you about the episodes you have listened to. Which one was your favorite? Who do you miss? What else do you want to listen to? I'm planning the spring season now, and as you know, every conversation matters. Drop me a line at hello@shippingpodcast.com and let me know what you think. That would definitely be your Christmas gift to me. Thank you for listening. Until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.